All right, you should be able to see my screen. It should be our slide, PatternFly community meeting. So we can go ahead and get started here. This is the birthday edition of the PatternFly community meeting. PatternFly just had its 6th birthday. Really so excited to celebrate PatternFly today and also talk about our major release. So we'll go ahead and get right into it. First, we're going to kick it off with talking about PatternFly's birthday and celebrating our milestones over the past 6 years. And then we're going to pass it off to Evan to talk about our major release and the updates we're making there. And Jesse's going to cover the accessibility update for this major release. And Tatani and Michael are going to go into the React and Core updates. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we're working on next. All right, Abby.
Thank you. Do you want me to share my screen now?
Yeah, that would be great.
All righty. All right. Here's my screen. Let me know if you can't see it. I'm really excited to talk about PatternFly's birthday today. On May 16th, PatternFly turned 6 years old, and that gives us an opportunity as a community to really take a step and reflect on all of the amazing milestones that we've reached over the past 6 years. These milestones include our website evolution, gaining visibility, logos and t-shirts, blogs and social media, connecting with flyers, and finally, usage metrics. On PatternFly's Medium publication, there is an article called Happy 6th Birthday, PatternFly, and it is a celebratory article that covers all of the milestones we're about to talk about in greater detail. And it also closes with some really heartwarming quotes from other flyers about how PatternFly has made a difference in their UX operations. So definitely check that out. Let's dive right into our website evolution. PatternFly started as a project for maintaining product consistency. And in 2014, the PatternFly team needed to think of a name for PatternFly because it wasn't always called PatternFly. A lot of different options were floated around. Fulcrum, Whipcord, Honeycomb, and all of the different naming options are in the Medium article, but we finally landed on PatternFly, and at the end of 2014, it was registered at patternfly.org. It was a WordPress website, and it was built on Bootstrap. And over the next couple years or so, the team came to the conclusion that they needed a website that was built by and for flyers. So that's exactly what happened. The website was moved off of WordPress, and this new site had improved information architecture and nav, new pattern page design, getting started experience content, as well as visual enhancements. Then in 2019, PatternFly 4 was launched, and there was no foundation of Bootstrap, and we consolidated on a single JS framework, which is React. 2019 is also the year that our PatternFly Design Kit launched, and this is a wonderful resource for designers to use to build high-fidelity mockups. And to this day, we continue to really focus on building the best possible user experience for the PatternFly site. And that involves regular website enhancements, content improvements, accessibility audits, and a whole lot more. Now on to gaining visibility. I like to think that PatternFly is a household name, but a lot of work has gone into getting the PatternFly name out there into the open source world. In 2015, the PatternFly team made its first appearance at Red Hat Summit. That was also the year that PatternFly was on NPM and the year that we launched our community meetings. Then in 2016, PatternFly was recognized among other Red Hat communities at Red Hat Summit. This was a very exciting moment for the team because PatternFly was on the big screen at Summit along with all of these other wonderful open source communities. And a year later in 2017, somebody from Red Hat's Madrid office tweeted out that a conference room was named PatternFly. That was exciting. Not only is it cool that a conference room is called PatternFly, but it's also a true testament to the fact that PatternFly is able to unite people from around the globe and keep us connected as a global community, which is really awesome. Now onto logos and t-shirts. This is the fun stuff. Our logo is probably the most salient brand element that we have. And as you can see in this quote from our very talented designer, Kyle Baker, when he was working on this logo, he really wanted to capture the angular nature of some of the patterns we were working on, as well as draw some inspiration from flying insects, which is pretty cool because it's like a nod to the fly and PatternFly. You can see here in this image how the logo has evolved. If you go on to Medium and look at the article, you'll see a lot more images of how this logo has grown and evolved at the beginning stages of design. It's just a really cool process. The logo is also on our PatternFly t-shirts. The first t-shirt was designed in 2015, and you can see in this image how the t-shirts have evolved over the years. If you want to get one of your own, you can do that through the Cool Stuff store. I left a link for that there. Now on to blogs and social media. I won't spend too much time talking about this because I talk about blogs and social media a lot at meetings, and I also send out our monthly content metric email. But I do want to spend some time acknowledging the progress that we've made in these areas. PatternFly's original blog launched a few years ago on WordPress, and in January, we moved it over to a Medium publication. And this has proven to be a wonderful space for us to grow our presence, connect with other people in the UX community, and share knowledge with our other fellow flyers. We also have a Twitter channel. The Twitter channel launched in 2015, but it started hitting major growth spurts in January, around the same time that Medium launched. Not only because we are using Twitter to promote Medium articles, but we're also using Twitter a bit more as a stream of regular information and a way to keep the PatternFly community informed and engaged. As we grow as a community, it's really important that everybody stays connected. And speaking of staying connected, we've put a lot of work into connecting with flyers over the past 6 years. In 2016, we organized our PatternFly meetup and a subsequent UXD Dev meetup, and that resulted in the PatternFly roadmap. The 2020 PatternFly roadmap is live on our Medium publication, so definitely check that out. Then in 2016, we started our PatternFly Slack workspace. And at the time, that workspace only had 64 members. We now have over 700 members and counting. And that design kit that I mentioned earlier, not only is it a great resource for designers, but it's also a way to keep people connected. The design kit and its designated GitHub repo shares up-to-date patterns and information with other flyers. And now ending on a really strong note with our usage metrics. This chart speaks for itself. This shows usage through April 2020. Throughout the years, our PatternFly CCS package downloads have grown significantly. We went from 0 downloads in 2014 to almost 830,000 downloads in 2019. These metrics were gathered in April, so at the time we weren't even halfway through 2020, and we were already at almost 511,000 downloads, so we are well on our way to exceeding our number of downloads in 2019. These metrics are really exciting. It's always good to see metrics growing, but these numbers are also very empowering and invigorating because it's showing that people are using PatternFly and they're finding it to be a valuable design system and a valuable community for making their UX the very best that it can be. So thank you. That is all I have. Thank you for listening, but also thank you for contributing to making it the design system it is today. All of those milestones would not have been possible without all of you, the community.
Thank you, Abby. All right, I'm going to pass it off to Jesse to get into the PatternFly accessibility update.
Sure, let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, hopefully you guys can see this and it's coming up okay. So basically, I wanted to give a quick rundown of where we are with accessibility and all the different updates we've made in PatternFly. And as you guys may already know, all of these updates are frequently informed by our monthly audit. We make that audit, checking all of our different components for different accessibility features and issues, and making sure we're cataloging it and then prioritizing it. So some of the updates we've made with this major release, we've really focused on cleanup and flexibility. So one of the very big ones is we've focused hard on our ARIA naming consistencies. We made sure that all of our props attributes are named in a consistent manner in which you can use. So we tried to align these ARIA-related prop names to using a naming convention that's human readable, and it's an element conjoined with the attribute name you're setting. So for example, if you have a close button, you can have close button ARIA label. For these cases, the exact prop names are dependent on the component in question. So we've also updated our drawer attributes, just kind of cleaning up some different ARIA attributes with drawer, and we've removed outdated or deprecated attributes, things that we're no longer using or just deprecated, such as remember me ARIA label. We've also removed problematic default heading levels, and basically when you have a default H1 heading level, a user can easily have an accessibility issue. So basically if you have multiple H1s on a page, screen reader users can't really determine the structure of the page easily, so we made sure that we removed that default and allowed for our users to kind of build that structure more flexibly and understandably. We've also set the ability to customize labels even further. So this is with our About Modal Close button, which increases your flexibility. We've also made significant updates to our components. So for a couple examples, we have chip group refactor. Here we've improved the structure and the screen reader experience. The nested chips sound significantly better this way in screen readers. And we've also done some modal updates. So for this, we've updated attributes, which improve the screen reader experience. And then we also set up for cases where users are supplying their own header or modal content, but haven't supplied an accessible name for them. So if you're using multiple different things and you want to customize it further, it basically will give you a warning to make sure that you know that this could potentially cause an accessibility issue. So we try to build in flexibility by making these props optional while also letting you know if you haven't provided an accessible name that will cause accessibility errors. We've updated the progress component. So what we noticed was happening is that because of the current structure of the progress component, it wasn't reading as good as it could be in screen reader. So we've added some tweaks to the accessibility structure and the attributes so that the way it reads now in VoiceOver and other screen readers is significantly improved. And then we've also made sure that our examples are improving with accessibility as well. And one example with that is the tooltip example. So we made sure those were keyboard accessible. So with this major release, we've really made sure that we've cleaned up a lot of the ARIA from the past, that we're making sure that our components are as flexible for you as possible, while also adding you the ability to make your components and your usage of these components as accessible as possible. So we've refactored and cleaned up and added for flexibility. I think that's the main rundown of a couple of the main examples that we've worked on with accessibility. Yeah, that's pretty much the summary. I guess I can
Thanks, Jessie.
to
Yeah, so oh yes, let's see. I think our slides got a little bit out of order today. Let's see. Evan, do you want to take it off to talk about our major release?
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to. And I will go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. All right, there we go. I think I've got that up there. Yeah, so obviously you can tell we're really excited about the major release and all the milestones we've hit as a PatternFly brand. Before we get into some of the more specific core and React changes that Michael and Satani are going to be talking about, I just wanted to share with you a little bit about what the infrastructure team has been working on. So I work with some of the awesome developers on that team who are helping to facilitate this release and hopefully make it as easy as possible and painless as possible for any developers who are bringing this on, so you can really kind of dive right in and take advantage of all of these changes as quickly as possible. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is just about how we're communicating these changes. So there's been a lot of stuff we've been working on over the last couple months, and even I've been pulled in from the last year or so to make this product as good as it can be. So the first thing that we'll take a look at is the table of contents for the release notes. I realize reading that slide title is probably not the most exciting thing to speak towards, but I think it's pretty cool how we've managed to take all of the changes and really put them in an easily consumable way here for you. So our typical release notes will kind of list each change that we've made in that release, but with all the exciting updates that we've got here, we wanted it to be kind of an easily accessible way to jump in, find exactly what it is you need, get right to it, see the changes right away, and kind of know what's going on. So here I've got side by side. These are still being polished, so we're putting the final touches on the release, but we're looking here at the core table of contents on the left and React on the right. And what we've got is we've got the changes broken down by package and by component. So you can dive right in. You'll see on the right, for instance, we've got React core, and it's got component by component links directly to any of those changes that we've made under those packages. Further down the list, we'd have things like React table, some of the other packages that go into that as well. So really trying to make it easy to see at a glance and get right to what it is you need. Clicking on an example here. So if we went to React and clicked on the alert, it would take us to the breaking change notes that we've got there. So here's a quick example. So for these changes, we really wanted to not just give a quick kind of, this changed, but we really want to give you a really quick summary of what the update is, but also word it in a way that developers know exactly, if any action is needed on their end, or kind of what's needed to make this work, that we include that in this quick blurb, and then also have a link right to the PR with the change. So for example, this alert, the first one, we changed the default variant to default. To maintain the current behavior, set the variant property to info. So it tells you kind of what's changed, how to adapt to it, and then has a link to that PR as well. And you can see there's two others for the alert there as well, related to the action prop for a couple different types of buttons. So again, really trying to make it succinct, but give you everything you might need to know what's changed, how does it affect me, and where can I find some more info there. So that said, that kind of summarizes what the release notes are going to look like and how you can kind of find out everything that's been changed with this new release. But definitely don't want you feeling overwhelmed. Half of the picture for us is making sure we are communicating it clearly, but the other half is making sure that we're doing everything on our side that we can to get you to adopt this release as quickly as possible. So some of the things that we've been working on to help with this are the code mods that we've been building out. So our team has built out, I believe, somewhere between 35 and 40 at this point, different code mods designed really to basically make a lot of these common updates for you in the code. And it'll be up to you kind of how to apply them, but we do have a lot of the bulk of these changes handled, and we've been testing these with some different developers from a few different products and had some great results so far. So we're really excited to put these out there. So similarly to the release notes in the code mods, we really wanted to give you, exactly what's changing, give you kind of an example and some more info. So you'll see in the documentation that'll come out with these, we've got a quick summary for each code mod of the changes that were made, a link to that original PR, and then before and after examples. So these are going to show, what your code may look like currently, and after this is run, what it'll look like so that it works with that PatternFly version 4. So again, another example, just following that alert, you can see we've replaced the action prop with action close or action links for better styling, a link to the PR, and then some examples. So for each of these, you can see before it's got the action prop on the alert, and after it updates that to action close or action links. So that's kind of what the documentation will look like. Hopefully it's clear, succinct, and kind of gets you all the information that you need. Our goal is to make this as easy and as possible. So any feedback that you have is definitely greatly appreciated as well. Here's a quick look at what this might look like. So this is actually running a a subset of the code mods in the Koku UI. So you can see it's just a quick one-line command, npx pf code mods, and then you give a path to the source. And so in this case, I believe this was run maybe a week or two back, but you can see here, it gives us a console warning that we've got 96 problems or 96 errors, just kind of running against all of those code mods that we have. And if you go ahead and actually just pass in a -- fix flag, you'll see that it goes ahead, takes those 96 warnings and errors and just pares them down to just one remaining. So our goal here was really just to address kind of the most common, easiest to fix, really get the bulk of the work kind of taken off of your plate and make sure that we're being as safe and thorough as possible. So we're only touching things that we know are these PatternFly elements that just need to be updated. And so this may look familiar. I just wanted to call out that there was a blog post, kind of shouting back to Abby's talk. There was a blog post that you can find on Medium that has a summary of the upcoming V4 release, and it has these images on there as well. And Zach's actually working on another blog post currently, and that's going to kind of give an account of the what and why behind the breaking changes, and hopefully kind of tell the story of that there. So keep an eye out for that. That should be coming out shortly. And I went ahead and just put a link to that blog post here in the notes as well, so you can get right to that, that last post that speaks towards some of this as well. So Michael and Tatani, again, will be going a little bit more into detail on the core and release changes, but hopefully that gives you an idea of kind of what to look for once the release goes live and you're ready to dive in and learn some more.
That's
Thanks so
awesome.
much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for listening or listing the Medium link there. That's really helpful. All right, I'll pass it off to Tatani with our React changes.
Hey, okay, so we made various changes in the React repo for this major release, from some design changes to match the new designs, and some API changes to add consistency to our components and just clean up some unused props. We also did some cleanup work along with refactoring in some areas. So for the design changes, just going to give you some highlights of some changes that are coming. So the accordion component, we removed the ability to disable the box shadow. For the button, we now allow the consumer to add an icon. And we allow the consumer to either put the text or the icon first in the button. For the card component, we now have a flat variation. And the chip group was refactored to support the new design, and we made some improvements to the API there. For the dropdown, we now allow an image to be added to the toggle, and the dropdown items can now be set to a plain text variation to display non-interactive text. The divider, we now have a vertical variation of the divider. The empty state icon can now be displayed at full height. There are some various changes to the form. We added support for an icon in the form label. We can also now add an icon to the helper text for the form. The label icon the label component has a lot of changes to support the new design. You can now change the color of the label. You can add an icon to the label. You can close the label, have an outline variation of the label or a filled variation. The nav component, we used to be able to set the variant on the nav list, but now the variant has been moved up to the nav. And the tab is also refactored. Some styling has been added for the text and an icon that can be added to the tab buttons. So if you want the proper styling, you should wrap the text or the icon within the tab with these two new wrapper components. The table also had a number of updates. Table text component was added, so the text is displays better when in a grid layout. Some new decorators were also added, and they can be passed to the transform result transforms. In terms of API improvements, the alert component, the action prop was split up into two different props: action close for close buttons and action link or for a single link or more, one or more link buttons. The gutter prop for our layouts was misleading from the way the prop was defined. The consumer believed you could set the gutter to different sizes, so that was updated now, so it's more clear that it's actually a Boolean, so it's either the layout has a gutter or doesn't. There are some changes to the modal, renaming props for consistency. So the no padding prop has now been renamed to has no body wrapper to be more apparent as to what that prop is doing. The title of the modal is now optional, and so we were able to remove the hide title prop. And the tab component also has a number of changes. The variant prop was renamed to component for consistency, and also from that, the tab variant prop was renamed to tab component. The wizard also has some changes. Previously, it would default to be displayed in a modal, but now it's defaults to being displayed in page. And if you still desire the old behavior where the wizard is placed in a modal, you can specify the is open prop and it will be placed in a modal for you. And some of the strength props were updated in the wizard for more flexibility. So now you can add a React node. And some of the default behaviors were also changed to better align with design recommendations. So for instance, alert now defaults to the default variation. Empty state is now full instead of large by default. And the action buttons in the modal default to the left now. And the popover size is now defaulted to medium. And there is quite a bit of cleanup work that we did as well, removing deprecated props in the app launcher. And empty state also has some props that are no longer used. Remove those, and just updated some of the prop names to be consistent with other components. Modal, we collapsed the is large and is small prop into a single variant. Can either have only one or the other. Select also updated a prop name to be consistent. Table changed the type of the on select prop. And some other deprecated props removed from the wizard nav. Text input text area, form group, and form select all had the deprecated is valid prop removed. And we also did remove the experimental exports since those should no longer be used. We no longer have the concept of experimental components. And we also, there was a big effort to resolve some TypeScript errors in our integration app. Another big change of note is that we renamed the toolbar layout to page editor tools. And then we also renamed the data toolbar to toolbar. And React styles we removed in motion and fixed the types. So there's a lot of changes that we did there, and I tried to highlight some of the big ones. And that's all I had.
Awesome. Thank you, Tatani. All right, and Michael's going to cover the core changes.
Okay. Yeah, so let's get back to this slide. So similar to React, we've made a lot of changes in core. I believe last I looked, it was 140 some PRs in this breaking change period. And so I won't be able to go through each of them, but as Evan alluded, we're going to have extensive notes on exactly what changed, why that matters, from both a breaking perspective, also from an enhancement perspective. So we fixed a lot of things and added a lot of things in this release, and I'll just highlight a handful of these. This will also include some visual changes. A lot of the changes that Satani mentioned in the React repository, we also made in the core repository. And so I'll highlight some of the more visual updates that we made to some of the components. All right. So I'll start with our table component. This first bullet says text wraps less aggressively by default. Our previous table was set to aggressively wrap content, and in a lot of cases, users ended up with text wrapping when that's not something that you would want to happen, and it was not the easiest thing in the world to disable that. So we updated the table to be less aggressive in its default text wrapping behavior, but then we added an option to opt in for more aggressive wrapping for certain types of cells that maybe have super long strings, URLs, that sort of thing. And then table header cells. These will now truncate by default. The previous behavior was that they would not wrap to new lines by default. And so if you had a long column header cell, that would define a wide width for your table, and often caused tables to be excessively wide or columns to be excessively wide because of that default behavior of the table header cell text. And so now longer strings will truncate by default, but of course that's something that you can also disable if you choose to opt into the previous behavior where you just want the table header cell text to display in its entirety and not wrap to multiple lines. You can have it wrap to multiple lines, that sort of thing. And then we enabled the same ability to have truncation in body cell text as well. So if you have cells in the body with lots of text, you don't want to wrap to multiple lines, but you also don't want to make a cell excessively wide. By displaying all of the text, you can choose to truncate that text as well. You can disable text wrapping entirely, just meaning make anything in the header, the body, etc., display on a single line, and all of the text would be displayed in its entirety without anything being clipped off. And then we added an option called fit content to where content in a cell will try to fill the existing space defined by the column width instead of expanding it like it might normally. And so those are just a few tools that we've made available to users. And so here's an example. We'll have this in our new workspace with table examples, just illustrating a breakdown of each of these features, how to use them with examples such as this. And so you can see truncation both in the header cells and the body cells. This URL is something that we enabled with aggressive word wrapping so that this doesn't stay on a single line when it's displayed, making the cell width super long, enabling text wrapping in the column header cells. This body cell is set to fit content, and then this text here is set to no wrap. Up next is our vertical navigation. We made a few changes to the vertical navigation that are pretty great. First of which is that the vertical navigation now hides at 1200 pixels viewport width instead of 768 pixels, so that it collapses off the screen and then it's accessible via the hamburger toggle menu in the header. This allows for the main content section of the page to be wider at the point that that vertical navigation is hidden, and it gives users a more consistent layout in the main section, as opposed to the main section being cramped pretty small. By the time that you've shrunk the viewport width down to 768 pixels, you're left with a really narrow main content section before the navigation is hidden. Well, now the navigation is hidden at the point where you have plenty of layout to work with in the main content section. I have a screenshot of this that I'll show what that looks like. And the dark theme that we added a while back to the vertical navigation as an opt-in is now the default. And so, of course, if that's not an option that you want to use, you don't like the dark theme for whatever reason in your application, we have an opt-out of that so that you can specify to use the light theme instead. And then we just overhauled the layout. And so, or I'm sorry, just the visual design. So the menu items are more clear. There's a clearer hierarchy when you have expanded navigation and that sort of thing. And here's a screenshot that illustrates all of these things. And so this shows on the left what your main content section looked like just prior to the vertical navigation being hidden. So making the window just a bit smaller would hide the vertical navigation. This was a kind of a content or a layout problem that users had to solve, was, well, how do I make my content look good at this viewport? And then once the vertical navigation is hidden, I have a much bigger viewport. It was a weird transition to have to account for in your layouts. And on the right, 1200 pixels shows what the content section looks like right before the vertical navigation is hidden. So it allows you to keep the basic layout that you have in the main section before and after the vertical navigation is hidden. And then this also shows the dark theme in the navigation and an expanded navigation, as well as the design updates. And this is another screen just showing a larger version of the design updates, as well as the dark theme navigation. And then with our label component, this was a pretty simple component prior to this release, and we've given it a bit of an overhaul with a lot of design improvements as well as extra functionality that didn't exist before. And so now you can choose from lots of different types of colors for your label component, as well as you can add icons. You can add a close button, which means that you could remove a label from a list that it's helping illustrate. And then there's a link version as well. And so this label could serve as a link that would take a user to another page, or maybe an anchor on the existing page and that sort of thing. And then, whoops. And one thing that's not visible here is that, as Tatani mentioned, one of the enhancements to the label was to add an outline variation so that there's a white background, and then the outline around the label is the color variation that the user can choose. Here's our new and improved tabs component. Basically just added a lot of functionality and a visual design overhaul, as well as rework the way that the scroll buttons work when you scroll in either direction in a tabs list that overflows the width that it's contained by. So you have vertical tabs now and horizontal tabs, which we had before, as well as a new, more open, less boxy variation of the tabs, and then what we're calling box tabs, which is the tabs with the gray background, and then the scroll buttons with the tabs. Instead of um, instead of being positioned on top of the tabs list, the scroll buttons are positioned to the left and the right of the tabs list, and both buttons are visible if there's overscroll or overflow content in either direction, which just improves the user experience. Whereas before, the tab buttons were placed on top of the text, and a button would disappear if there was no more overflow in that particular direction, which meant that if you were to scroll on, say, the right arrow here, and you press it and press it until when you got to the end of the screen or to the end of the list, that button would disappear, and that would just be a little bit jarring for the user, as well as likely cause an inadvertent click on the button that was underneath it. And then our alert component, we have an improved design and layout. So this illustrates the new design, as well as the layout, specifically calling out where you place your actions in the alert. Previously, actions were placed to the right, or I'm sorry, to the left of the close button, adjacent to the title, which didn't give users much room to work with. So now the alert actions are placed at the bottom of the component, allowing for not limiting the width that users can specify for their title, as well as being able to use as many actions as you choose. And then there was just a lot more stuff that we introduced. And this is not by no means an exhaustive list, just a handful of larger concept types of changes. So we have more compact spacing in a handful of components. That's a theme that we've been introducing to PatternFly since it was created. So that's really great. We've improved our use of borders and drop shadows to where these are more communicative of depth on the page. In a lot of cases where drop shadows are used for things that to communicate that an element is on top of another element, and borders used to indicate that elements are adjacent to one another. We went from 2 fonts with so I guess taking a step back, previously we used the Overpass font in PatternFly, and there was an opt-in for Red Hat's new font, Red Hat Text and Red Hat Display. And so the default font in PatternFly has updated to be Red Hat Text, and Overpass is now an opt-in. However, with our previous opt-in of the Red Hat fonts, we had the 2 fonts, Red Hat Text and Display, as options. Well, we've simplified that to a single font. So we're just using Red Hat Text across the library, which is a lot easier to work with, more consistent with creating typography either in our components as well as custom typography in applications. We reorganized and improved the SAS directory and file structure. So moved some of our style sheets into logical directories that cleans up the way that those files are structured. Across the board, we improved color accessibility. We updated a lot of our global colors, added some new global colors, and then implemented those across the library in our components. We updated class names, element names, variable names, and things like that, just in an effort to clean up the code, be consistent, and create a consistent expectation for what users might expect for element names and variable names to be. And then we cleaned up a lot of our old unused CSS, things that we couldn't remove because that would create a breaking change for users. Well, this was the opportunity to go in and just clean house and remove all of the old unused stuff, resulting in an overall leaner, smaller package size, and then a lot more. And so soon we'll have the full release notes, enhancement notes, and things like that that's coming for the V4 release. And that's it.
Great. Thank you, Michael. All right, I'm gonna take the screen share really quick. You should be seeing my presentation, so please let me know if you're not. Quickly on what we're working on next, I've linked to the roadmap, which is still in progress, and we'll have our milestones updated soon. We're going to be working on date and time picker, inline edit with the dropdown, updating the demo with the masthead hover and banner. That's very loose, but I've listed the relevant issues to those particular enhancements in React. So please check it out, and many other enhancements and updates coming on as well. This is just representative of our next sprint. All right, so thank you, everybody. Any questions before we stop today? All right. Thank you. Yeah, and then as a last note, this will be my last community meeting hosting. Next community meeting, Evan, who presented today, is going to be taking over, as well as the role of PatternFly Scrum Master. So yeah, I'll be passing the torch to him. And thank you to everybody for attending the PatternFly community meetings, and please keep sharing it out. I'll be posting this recording on YouTube, as well as sending you PDF slides. So I will talk to you soon, and special thanks to the PatternFly team. I'm getting distracted by the chat. All right. Bye, everybody.
Great meeting, everyone.